The evening sky turned soft orange as the sun lowered behind the hills. The human man, Daniel, walked quietly along the path that led to the lake. He came here often to escape the noise of the town, to breathe fresh air, and to think. But that evening was different, because someone was already there. At first, Daniel thought it was just a young girl standing near the edge of the water. Her back was to him, her long hair glowing faintly in the last light of the day. But then he noticed the shape of her ears, longer than human ears, and the way her skin shimmered as if touched by starlight. He froze for a moment, realizing she was not human at all, but alien. She stepped into the water slowly, her bare feet making no sound. Daniel thought she wanted to swim, and he almost turned away to give her privacy. But something about the way she moved stopped him. She wasn't playing or relaxing, she was searching. Watching the lake carefully as if waiting for something, Daniel crouched behind a tree, unsure if he should reveal himself. The alien girl knelt down and touched the water. The surface rippled with a glow that did not come from the sunset. Daniel's heart began to pound, because he understood this was no ordinary girl taking a swim. The girl whispered words he could not understand. Her voice was soft but carried across the still lake. The water around her hands began to glow brighter, forming rings of light. Daniel's eyes widened, and for a second he wondered if he should run, but he stayed, because something about her movements was not threatening. It was careful, almost desperate. Her eyes reflected the glow of the water, and they were filled with a sadness Daniel could not ignore. She looked young, maybe not much older than a teenager in human years, but there was an old wisdom in her gaze. Suddenly the girl turned her head slightly, her eyes locked on Daniel's hiding place. He froze, holding his breath, hoping she had not truly seen him, but she whispered something again, and this time it felt like the words were directed at him. Daniel slowly stepped out from behind the tree. The ground felt heavy beneath his feet, but he could not leave now. The alien girl stared at him, not moving, not afraid, only watching. Then she raised her hand slowly, not as a warning, but as an invitation. Daniel approached the lake's edge. The glow in the water spread wider, as if responding to his presence. He looked at her, confused, but she said nothing. Her eyes spoke more than her lips could, and they spoke of need. "Do you want to swim?" Daniel asked carefully. His voice broke the silence, and for a second it sounded foolish. The alien girl tilted her head, her expression unreadable. Then she shook her head slowly, her lips forming a faint, sad smile. Daniel realized then that she hadn't come to the lake for swimming. There was something else, something hidden beneath the water. The glow shimmered brighter as if alive, and Daniel felt an invisible pull drawing him closer. The alien girl whispered again, her voice trembling this time. Her eyes begged for something unspoken. Daniel's heart raced, because in that moment he knew one thing for certain. He had just stepped into something far bigger than a quiet evening by the lake. The water rippled, the glow danced, and the night began to fall. Daniel stood beside the alien girl, uncertain and afraid. But deep inside, he knew her story was only beginning, and somehow he was now part of it. The lake was quiet, yet Daniel felt the air around him thicken. The alien girl stood ankle-deep in the glowing water, her body still, her gaze sharp as if she was listening to something hidden beneath the waves. Daniel shifted uneasily, wondering if he had made a mistake by showing himself. But she didn't look angry or afraid. She only looked focused, almost as if she had been waiting for him. She raised her hands slowly, her slender fingers cutting through the air in shapes Daniel couldn't understand. Symbols shimmered above her palms, glowing softly like fireflies trapped in glass. The water beneath her rippled again, but not like any normal lake. It pulsed as though it had a heartbeat. Daniel took a cautious step back, his mind telling him to run, but his legs refusing to obey. The girl turned her head toward him once more, her eyes glowing faintly now. She made a gesture, pointing toward the water as if asking him to come closer. Daniel shook his head nervously, whispering, "I don't think so." But the girl's expression softened, and she placed her hand against her chest, as though to say she meant no harm. Daniel swallowed hard, torn between fear and curiosity. He remembered stories about aliens, stories of abductions and experiments. But she didn't look like a monster. Her movements were precise, controlled, almost ceremonial. And the more he watched, the more he felt that what she was doing wasn't dangerous. It was necessary. The lake began to shimmer again, brighter than before. Daniel noticed something strange. The fish beneath the surface were not moving like normal creatures. Instead, they circled in patterns, following the glowing ripples as if they were obeying her command. Daniel's eyes widened as he realized she wasn't swimming at all. She was controlling the water and everything in it. The girl lifted her hands higher and the glowing symbols burst in to faint streams of light that fell into the lake. The fish scattered for a second, then regrouped, forming a perfect ring around her. Daniel's chest tightened, because whatever was happening, it was no accident. This was a ritual, and she was the one guiding it. A sudden gust of wind brushed over the lake, carrying a faint sound like whispers. Daniel looked around nervously, but there was no one else. The alien girl, however, tilted her head as if she could hear voices clearly. Her lips moved silently, answering words Daniel could not hear. His skin prickled, every instinct telling him something wasn't right. He had thought she came to the lake for something simple, for swimming or hiding, but her behavior told him otherwise. There was purpose in every movement, every whisper, every glance at him. Daniel edged closer, unable to hold his curiosity anymore. "What are you doing?" he asked softly. The girl turned toward him, her face glowing faintly from the reflected light. For a long moment, she just stared, and then she spoke a single word, her voice fragile yet firm. "Protect." Daniel frowned, his confusion deepening. Protect? From what? From who? But before he could ask again, the water surged upward in a sudden column. The glowing ripples spread out like waves of energy, sending shock through the ground beneath his feet. Daniel stumbled back, almost falling, but the girl raised her hand sharply, and the water stilled again. Her chest heaved with effort, her breathing quick and shallow. Whatever she was doing, it was draining her strength, yet she refused to stop. For a second, Daniel thought about running back to town, but something inside him told him that leaving her here would be wrong. She wasn't just playing with the lake. She was fighting for something unseen, and now, whether he liked it or not, he was part of it. The girl's eyes met his again, and in that silent stare, he felt a strange message press against his mind. She wasn't asking for help, she was demanding it. Daniel stood frozen on the shore, his heart racing. He thought she just wanted to swim, but now he knew, whatever her plan was, it was only beginning. The night deepened around the lake, the sky filled with stars that shimmered faintly on the water's glowing surface. Daniel stood still, his heart beating fast as he watched the alien girl. She looked fragile, almost delicate, yet there was a strength in her every movement. She wasn't here by accident, he knew that now. The girl lifted her hands again, and the light spread across the water like a silver net. It shimmered, stretching outward in perfect patterns. Daniel's breath caught as he realized the shapes were not random. They were symbols, strange and complex, as though she was drawing a map across the lake. Her lips moved in whispers that carried softly through the night air. Daniel couldn't understand the language, but the rhythm of her words felt old and heavy. It was like she was reciting something sacred, something passed down for generations. And with each word, the lake responded, glowing brighter and brighter. Daniel took a cautious step closer. The girl's eyes flickered toward him, but she did not stop. Her gaze was serious, filled with a warning, but also something else. It felt like she needed him here, like he was part of her secret plan. Daniel's thoughts swirled in confusion. Why him? Why now? He had only come here to walk by the lake, to enjoy silence after a long day, and now he was standing beside an alien girl performing a ritual that looked more dangerous with each passing second. Suddenly, the water pulsed violently, sending a wave against the shore. Daniel stumbled back, his shoes sinking into the mud, but the girl didn't flinch. Instead, she pressed her palms into the glowing surface and whispered louder. The lake responded, a beam of pale light shooting straight into the sky. Daniel gasped. Ed, his eyes widening as the beam split into smaller threads that spread like roots across the heavens. It looked like she was sending a signal, but to whom? The girl's body shook with the effort, and for the first time Daniel saw the strain on her face. Sweat glistened on her forehead, her lips trembling as she pushed herself harder. It wasn't just a ritual, it was a battle. Something inside the lake resisted her, and she was forcing it to obey. Daniel called out, his voice breaking the silence. "What are you doing?" The girl's eyes locked onto his, and for a brief second he felt something strange. It was like her voice was inside his mind, whispering to him without sound. Her words were clear, chilling. I must seal it. Seal what? Daniel's stomach twisted with dread. He scanned the lake nervously, the glowing water swirling in unnatural patterns. There was something alive beneath, something far larger than fish. The ripples were too heavy, too powerful. Daniel's skin prickled as a shadow passed beneath the surface. It was massive, a dark shape moving slowly, circling them both. The girl whispered faster now, her voice rising with urgency. Her plan became clear. She wasn't here to swim. She was here to contain whatever was hiding under the water. Daniel's throat went dry as the shadow pressed closer to the surface. A faint growl echoed from the depths, vibrating through the ground. The girl's face hardened, her eyes burning with determination. She pressed her palms down once more, and the glowing net above the lake tightened. Daniel realized the truth then. The alien girl's plan was not to enjoy the lake, it was to protect it. She was trying to lock away something dangerous, something that could escape if she failed, and she couldn't do it alone. Her gaze shot to him again, sharp and pleading. This time there was no mistaking her silent message. He was part of the plan, whether he wanted to be or not. The lake roared with power. The shadow thrashed beneath, and Daniel understood. This was never about swimming, it was about survival. The beam of light faded slowly into the night sky, but the air around the lake still trembled. Daniel stood frozen, his eyes locked on the glowing surface where the shadow had moved. The alien girl was breathing heavily, her small body shaking from the effort. But even in her exhaustion, her gaze was sharp, scanning the trees around them. Daniel followed her eyes, his heart racing. At first, he saw nothing, only the quiet forest swaying with the wind. But then, out of the corner of his vision, he noticed movement. A figure, tall and thin, standing among the shadows. Daniel's chest tightened as another figure appeared, and then another. Dozens of them, hidden between the trees, their glowing eyes fixed on the lake. They weren't moving closer, but they weren't leaving either. They were watching, silent and patient. The girl tensed, her fingers curling into fists, her lips pressed together, and for the first time Daniel saw fear in her eyes. It wasn't the shadow beneath the water that scared her most. It was the watchers in the forest. Daniel's voice cracked as he whispered, "Who are they?" The girl turned her head toward him slowly, her face pale in the moonlight. She didn't answer with words, but the way her shoulders trembled told him everything. They weren't friends, they weren't allies. A chill ran down Daniel's spine. The watchers stood still, their glowing eyes unblinking. It felt like they had been waiting for this night, waiting for her to begin the ritual. The alien girl stepped back toward Daniel, her arm brushing against his. Her closeness surprised him, but he didn't move away. Her breathing was shaky, her body pressed low like a cornered animal. Daniel realized she wasn't just afraid, she was preparing to fight. The silence was unbearable. The watchers didn't speak, didn't make a sound, but Daniel could feel their presence pressing down on him. It was like standing in the middle of a storm before it broke. Finally, one of the watchers shifted, stepping forward into the faint light. Its body was cloaked in dark fabric, its skin a pale gray that shimmered faintly. The creature's face was hidden, but Daniel could feel its gaze like a blade. It raised its hand slowly, pointing toward the girl. She flinched, clutching Daniel's wrist. Her grip was cold and desperate. Daniel's pulse hammered in his ears. He had no weapon, no plan, nothing but the choice to stand or run. The watcher lowered its hand, and the others stirred. A ripple of movement spread through the trees, their glowing eyes shifting. They weren't rushing forward yet, but Daniel could tell. They were waiting for the right moment. The girl whispered suddenly, her voice trembling but urgent. "They cannot touch the lake," she said, her words quick and heavy. Daniel frowned, confused. "Then why are they here?" Her answer was a single word, quiet but sharp. "To kill." Daniel's stomach turned cold. He looked back at the water, still glowing faintly from her ritual. The shadow beneath had stilled, trapped under the shimmering net. But now a new danger surrounded them. Predators in the trees. The girl pulled him closer, her eyes meeting his. "Stay," she whispered firmly, her voice shaking. It wasn't a plea, it was an order. Daniel nodded, though fear coiled in his chest. The watchers didn't advance, but their numbers seemed to grow. Every time Daniel blinked, another glowing pair of eyes appeared deeper in the forest. They were everywhere, silent hunters in the night, and all of them were waiting for her to fail. Daniel clenched his fists, trying to steady his breath. He had thought this was only about the lake, only about the shadow beneath, but now he understood something larger was unfolding. The girl wasn't just fighting the water, she was fighting enemies who wanted her dead. The forest remained still, the lake shimmered faintly. Daniel stood between them, his heart pounding. The Watchers had revealed themselves, but their true move was yet to come, and when it did, he knew the night would explode into chaos. The forest was alive with glowing eyes, dozens of Watchers waiting silently. Daniel's throat tightened as he stood beside the alien girl. He could hear his own heartbeat louder than the sounds of the night. She clung to his wrist with surprising strength, refusing to let go. For a long moment, nothing moved. The only sound was the quiet lapping of water against the shore. The Watchers stood still, their gaze fixed on her. It felt like they were waiting for her to make a mistake. The girl's breath trembled, but her voice was steady when she spoke. "They will not leave," she whispered, her eyes locked on the trees. "They wait for the net to break." Daniel swallowed hard, not sure he understood. "The net?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. She nodded toward the glowing water. The light was dimmer now, flickering like a dying flame. Her body swayed with exhaustion, every breath costing her strength. Daniel understood then, her ritual was not finished, and without it, whatever dark thing lurked beneath the water would rise again. The Watchers were not here for her alone. They were here to claim what was trapped under the surface. Fear gripped Daniel's chest. He wasn't ready for this. He wasn't a fighter. He was just a man who wanted peace by the lake, but fate had pulled him into something far beyond his world. The girl turned suddenly, her eyes locking onto his. Her voice broke as she whispered, "I cannot hold it alone." Daniel's breath caught, the weight of her words pressing down on him. He was part of this now. There was no turning away, but the choice was his. He could run, leave her behind, and maybe survive. Or he could stay, risk his life for someone he barely knew, someone not even human. Daniel's mind screamed for him to run. The Watchers in the trees shifted, their presence heavy and suffocating. He imagined them rushing forward, clawing, tearing, ending his life in seconds. But then he looked at her and the thought vanished. Her eyes were not like theirs. They weren't cold. They weren't cruel. They held fear, yes, but also hope. She believed in him, a stranger, more than he believed in himself. Daniel clenched his fists. His fear did not fade, but something stronger rose inside him. A decision, sharp and unshakable. He whispered back to her, "I'll stay." The girl's lips parted in shock. For the first time, her eyes softened with something like relief. Her grip on his wrist loosened, but she didn't let go completely. Together, they turned back to face the lake. The water pulsed again, the shadow beneath stirring restlessly. Daniel felt the ground vibrate with its movements. The Watchers grew restless too, shifting in the trees. They could sense the ritual faltering. The girl raised her hands again, her voice breaking into song-like whispers. The glowing net above the lake flickered weakly. Daniel stepped closer, unsure what to do, but he felt something pull at him, something unseen. The air around him thickened, pressing against his chest. His heartbeat quickened until it matched the rhythm of her voice, and then he felt it, the lake pulling at him, calling him. Her plan wasn't only hers anymore, it was theirs. The girl glanced at him, her face pale. "You must choose," she whispered, her voice thin. "Step into the water or leave now." Her words cut like a blade. Daniel stared at the glowing surface. The Watchers in the trees leaned forward, sensing the moment. The shadow below pressed harder against the net. Every heartbeat brought the choice closer. Daniel took one slow breath. His fear screamed inside him, but his feet moved forward anyway. The water touched his sea. Hose, cool and alive with energy. He had chosen. He would not leave her. The Watchers hissed in unison, their glowing eyes narrowing. The girl's whisper grew louder, her voice mixing with his presence. The net above the lake flickered, then steadied. Together, they had made the choice. The night grew heavier, the air charged with danger. Daniel's path was set now. There was no turning back, and deep inside, he knew his life would never be the same again. The water rose around Daniel's legs, cool but alive with a strange pulse. It felt like the lake itself was breathing. drawing him deeper with every step. Beside him, the alien girl's voice carried through the night, soft but commanding. Her words were foreign, yet their meaning pressed against his chest like a heartbeat. The net above the lake flickered again, thin threads of light trembling in the dark sky. The shadow beneath thrashed violently, its movements shaking the ground. Daniel's body stiffened in fear, but the girl reached out and took his hand. Her touch was cold, but steady, like she had done this before. The moment her skin touched his, Daniel gasped. A surge of energy shot through him, racing down his arms. He staggered, nearly falling, but she held him firm. Their heartbeats aligned, pounding in unison. Daniel's mind filled with flashes of images. A great city of shining towers, now broken and burned. Alien children running through the ruins, crying. And above them, the same watchers with glowing eyes, destroying everything. Daniel pulled back with a gasp, but the girl tightened her grip. Her eyes glowed brighter now, locking onto his. "You see," her whisper filled his mind without sound. "This is why." His chest heaved as the visions faded, leaving only the lake around him. She wasn't here for herself, he realized. She was here for her people, for something greater. And now she had tied him into it. The bond between them grew stronger with every second. Daniel could feel her pain, her exhaustion, and her determination. It burst through him as if it was his own. For the first time, he wasn't just watching, he was part of the ritual. The water glowed brighter around their joined hands. The net in the sky steadied, holding firm against the shadows thrashing. The watchers in the trees shifted uneasily, their glowing eyes narrowing. They could sense the bond forming, and they didn't like it. Daniel clenched his jaw, tightening his grip on her hand. "I'm with you," he whispered, though he wasn't sure if she understood the words. But she looked at him, her lips curving into the faintest smile. And in that smile, Daniel felt courage bloom inside him. The shadow beneath roared, a deep guttural sound that rippled across the water. The trees shook, birds scattered into the night. The watchers hissed, their bodies swaying as if preparing to strike. But the girl stood tall, her voice rising with new strength. The bond gave her power, Daniel realized. Where before her whispers had been weak, now they boomed with force. The light spread wider, covering the entire lake in glowing waves. The net above grew thicker, chains of light locking together. Daniel felt the weight of her mission settle into his bones. This wasn't just about a lake or a ritual. It was about stopping something monstrous from escaping. And without their bond, she would have already failed. The girl's body shook with effort, but she didn't falter. Her free hand reached out, brushing Daniel's chest lightly. Her voice echoed in his head again, clear and sharp. "You are chosen." Daniel's breath caught. He had never felt important in his life, just another man in a crowded world. But now, in this dark forest, in this strange night, he was the difference between survival and disaster. The bond pulsed again, sealing tighter. He could feel her strength flowing into him and his into her, two beings from different worlds, now tied together by something greater. Together, they were stronger than either could be alone. The lake glowed like a living star, the net blazed overhead. The shadow thrashed in fury, but could not break free. The watchers hissed louder, anger twisting their silence into menace. They would not wait much longer. Daniel gripped her hand firmly, his fear replaced with resolve. Whatever happened next, they would face it as one. The bond was sealed and there was no undoing it. This night had changed them forever. The night grew heavier, the air thick with tension. Daniel stood in the water, his hands still locked with the alien girls. Their bond glowed faintly between their palms, threads of light connecting their bodies. But the watchers in the trees had grown restless, their glowing eyes shifting closer. The first one stepped forward, tall and cloaked in shadows. Its movements were slow but deliberate, like a predator circling its prey. Behind it, more followed, slipping out from the darkness. They no longer cared to hide. They wanted the ritual to end. The alien girl's voice rose, steady but trembling. She poured more energy into the glowing net above the lake, but Daniel could feel her body weaken, her strength draining with every word. She was giving everything she had, and still it wasn't enough. The shadow beneath the water roared, a deep and monstrous sound. The lake erupted with waves, glowing foam crashing against the shore. Daniel stumbled, but the girl held firm, her eyes burning with determination. Her lips whispered, "Hold," and he obeyed, standing his ground. The watchers hissed in unison, their bodies leaning forward. One raised a weapon, a curved blade that gleamed in the moonlight. Daniel's heart hammered in his chest, fear crawling up his spine. He had no weapon, no armor, nothing but his choice to stand beside her. The first watcher lunged, its blade slicing through the air. Daniel reacted without thinking, pulling the girl behind him. The blade struck the water instead, sending a spray of glowing dew drops across his face. The creature hissed angrily, its glowing eyes narrowing. The girl raised her free hand, and a burst of light exploded outward. The watcher staggered back, its cloak burning where the light touched, but the effort drained her further, her knees buckling beneath her. Daniel caught her quickly, holding her upright. Her whisper reached him again, faint but sharp. "You must fight," she said, her eyes desperate. Daniel stared at her in disbelief. "Fight? With what?" But the girl only closed her eyes, pressing her palm against his chest. A surge of energy shot through him, stronger than before. His vision blurred, and when it cleared, he saw light forming around his hands. It wrapped his fingers, his arms, shaping into a faint weapon of pure energy. Daniel gasped, staring at it in shock. The watchers hissed again, their glowing eyes widening. They realized he was no longer just a bystander. The bond had given him power, and now he was part of the trial. The first watcher lunged again, but this time Daniel raised his hand. The energy blade in his grasp flared, striking against the creature's weapon. The impact sent sparks of light scattering across the lake. The watcher hissed and staggered back, surprised by his strength. Daniel's arms trembled, unused to this strange power, but the girl's voice whispered inside him, guiding his movements. "Do not fear," she said, her tone calm despite her exhaustion. "Together, we are stronger." The battle grew fiercer, the watchers circling the shore. Some stepped closer, blades ready, their eyes glowing with hunger. Daniel swung the weapon of light, keeping them back. Every strike sent ripples across the lake, every clash echoing in the forest. But the shadow beneath the water grew angrier, thrashing violently. Waves crashed harder, shaking the ground beneath their feet. Daniel realized the trial wasn't just against the watchers, it was against the monster below as well. The girl's strength faltered, her voice breaking. The net above the lake flickered dangerously. Daniel gritted his teeth, stepping in front of her. He would not let them take her, not while he still stood. His body ached, his breath came heavy, but he raised the weapon again. The watchers hissed and paused, uncertain now. He was not the weak human they expected. He was bonded, chosen, and unafraid to stand. The trial had begun. It would test his courage, his strength, and his very soul. And Daniel knew one thing with absolute certainty. He could not afford to fail. The forest was silent for a heartbeat, broken only by the hiss of the watchers. Daniel stood firm at the lake's edge, the strange weapon of light glowing faintly in his hands. The alien girl leaned against him, her body trembling from exhaustion, yet her eyes still shone with determination, refusing to surrender. The net above the lake flickered dangerously. Every time it weakened, the shadow beneath the water pressed harder against it. Waves slammed against the shore, shaking the ground beneath Daniel's feet. He knew the ritual was close to breaking. The watchers hissed louder, sensing her weakness. One of them raised its weapon again but did not strike. Instead, it spoke in a low, guttural voice that made Daniel's skin crawl. "Give her to us, and you may live," it said. Daniel's jaw tightened, his grip on the light weapon steady. He looked down at the girl, her pale face illuminated by the glow of the lake. She shook her head faintly, whispering, "Do not listen." Her voice cracked with exhaustion, but her eyes begged him to stay strong. Daniel turned back to the watchers, his voice shaking but firm. "No," he said simply, the word hanging in the cold night air. The creatures hissed, their glowing eyes narrowing in anger. They moved closer, their patience running thin. The girl's hand slipped into his once again, and as their bond pulsed with light, a wave of memory crashed into Daniel's mind. He staggered, visions flooding his thoughts faster than he could resist. It wasn't just flashes, it was her life, her truth. He saw her world, once filled with oceans brighter than jewels. Her people lived in harmony with the water, protectors of its secrets. But then the watchers came, dark hunters who desired only power. They slaughtered her kind, burned their homes, and poisoned their seas. She had escaped, carrying the last piece of her people's legacy. The power hidden in the lake was not her enemy, it was her burden. It was a creature born from her world's core, something both sacred and dangerous. Her mission was to seal it, to prevent it from ever being used as a weapon. Daniel gasped as the visions ended, his knees weak. The girl's grip tightened on his hand, anchoring him back to the present. Her voice filled his head again, quiet and broken. "You see now? This is why I cannot fail." Daniel's chest ached, the weight of her truth pressing on him. She was not a stranger anymore, not just an alien girl by a lake. She was the last of her kind, the guardian of a dying legacy, and now she had chosen him to help carry that burden. The Watchers stepped closer, their voices blending into a chilling hiss. "You cannot stop us," one snarled, its blade glinting in the moonlight, but Daniel raised his weapon of light, fire burning in his chest. He shouted back, "We'll see about that." The girl's eyes softened as she looked at him. Her lips trembled with words she didn't speak aloud, but through the bond he felt her gratitude, her hope. It gave him strength greater than fear. The net above the lake flickered once more, but this time Daniel stepped forward, channeling the bond into the light weapon. It pulsed brighter, the glow spreading across the water like fire. The shadow beneath roared in rage, trapped again by their combined strength. The Watchers shrieked, their anger rising. They could no longer wait. They had to act now. But Daniel no longer felt helpless. The truth had given him purpose. He wasn't just standing beside her. He was fighting for her people, for her survival, for the future. The truth bound them tighter than any ritual, and he knew, whatever happened, he would not abandon her. The night trembled as the lake roared with power. The net of light above it flickered wildly, threatening to shatter. The shadow beneath thrashed harder than ever, crashing waves against the shore. Daniel tightened his grip on the glowing weapon, his chest heavy with dread. The alien girl staggered beside him, her body weak, her face pale. She had given everything to hold the ritual, but her strength was nearly gone. Her hands trembled as she raised them again, trying to steady the net, but Daniel could feel through the bond that her energy was fading. The Watchers sensed it too, their glowing eyes gleaming with hunger. They stepped closer, their blades catching the moonlight. They wanted her broken. They wanted the lake's secret unleashed. Daniel's pulse raced as he realized time was running out. The girl's voice whispered faintly in his mind. "The net cannot hold much longer," she said, her words filled with sorrow. "One of us must endure the final pain or all is lost." Daniel froze, not understanding, but the look in her eyes told him she meant it. He shook his head quickly, panic rising. "What do you mean, final pain?" he asked, his voice trembling. Her lips pressed together, her eyes glistening with tears. Finally, she whispered aloud, "A sacrifice. The bond demands it." Daniel's chest tightened as if struck by a blade. A sacrifice. One of them had to give everything to finish the ritual. If neither did, the net would collapse, the monster would rise, and the Watchers would unleash destruction beyond imagining. The girl lowered her gaze, her shoulders heavy. "It should be me," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I am the last of my kind, and my life belongs to this duty." Daniel's throat burned, anger rising in him. "No," he said firmly, his voice breaking the night silence. She looked at him in shock, her lips parting. But Daniel stepped closer, gripping her shoulders tightly. His eyes blazed with a fire she had not seen before. "You've carried this alone long enough," he said. "You've given everything, lost everything, and still you stand." Tears welled in her eyes, her breath trembling, but Daniel continued, "Let me do this. Let me finish what you began." The girl shook her head desperately. "No, you cannot," she whispered, her voice raw with fear. "The ritual will tear you apart. Your body is not meant for it." Daniel smiled faintly, though his heart pounded with terror. "Maybe not," he admitted, "but I'd rather give my life than see yours end tonight." Her tears spilled freely, her hands clutching at his arms. "Please don't," she whispered. "I cannot watch you die." Daniel reached up, brushing her hair back gently. His voice softened, steady despite the storm around them. "You're not alone anymore," he said. "Whatever happens, you'll live, and you'll remember that someone chose you." The Watchers hissed, sensing the decision. The net cracked, lines of light shattering in the sky. The shadow beneath roared, breaking against its prison. The final moment had come. Daniel stepped forward, releasing her hand slowly. The girl cried out, reaching for him, but he did not stop. He walked into the glowing water, the bond pulsing brighter with each step. The lake embraced him, alive with fire and light. Pain tore through his body, but he clenched his teeth, refusing to scream. He felt his strength pour into the net, repairing the cracks. The light blazed brighter, chains of energy reforging around the monster. The watchers shrieked in rage as the ritual tightened again. The girl fell to her knees on the shore, tears streaming down her face. Her hand reached helplessly toward him, but she could not pull him back. She could only watch as Daniel gave everything he had, his body trembling, his voice whispering, "Hold on." Daniel's body glowed faintly, his form flickering like fading stars. The girl crawled forward, clutching the water desperately. "Don't leave me," she begged, her voice breaking. But his last smile was soft, his whisper carried only for her. "You're safe now," he said, his voice fading. And then the light swallowed him whole, leaving only ripples on the lake. The lake was quiet, glowing faintly in the aftermath of the storm. The watchers had fled into the forest, their glowing eyes gone, their whispers silenced. The shadow beneath the water had been sealed, its roars fading into the deep. But on the shore, the alien girl knelt alone, her tears falling into the glowing ripples. Daniel was gone, his body swallowed by the light, his sacrifice echoing in the silence. The girl's hands trembled as she reached into the water, searching for him. But all she found were faint sparks of energy, drifting like broken stars. Her heart ached with a pain so heavy she could barely breathe. The bond between them was not broken. She could still feel him, faint and distant, like a heartbeat in the far horizon, but his body was no longer there. He had given everything to save her, to finish what she could not. The girl collapsed to the ground, clutching her chest, her tears mixed with the lake's glow, each drop shining like crystal. She whispered his name over and over, her voice breaking. She had not expected this. She had not wanted this. For a long time she stayed there. The night passed slowly, the stars fading as the horizon grew pale. The forest was silent, the watchers nowhere to be seen. Only the sound of the lake remained, calm now, gentle. As the first rays of dawn touched the water, something stirred. The lake shimmered brighter, threads of light rising from its surface. The girl looked up, her swollen eyes wide with shock. The glow gathered together, forming a faint outline. It was Daniel, his figure faint, his body woven of light. He stepped slowly onto the surface of the water, his face calm. The girl gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Her tears returned, but this time mixed with hope. He looked at her, his eyes soft, his voice carried by the wind. "I am still here," he whispered gently. She reached out, desperate to touch him. Her fingers brushed the light of his arm, warm but untouchable. The bond pulsed again, stronger than before. It was different now, not of flesh but of spirit. Daniel was no longer only human. The ritual had changed him, binding his soul to the lake itself. The girl's sobs turned into quiet laughter, broken but filled with relief. "You live," she whispered, her body trembling with joy. Daniel smiled faintly, his light flickering in the morning sun. "I live because of you," he said softly. The dawn spread across the forest, golden light cutting through the trees. The watchers were gone, their power broken. The shadow was sealed, its prison stronger than ever. And though Daniel was no longer the same, he was alive. The girl rose slowly, her body still weak, but her heart lighter. She stepped into the water, walking carefully toward him. Her reflection shimmered beside his glowing form. Together, they stood in the center of the lake, bound as one. Daniel looked at her, his voice steady, though his body was light. "You are not alone anymore," he said firmly. Her lips trembled, her tears falling fresh. She whispered back, "And neither are you." The bond pulsed once more, spreading across the lake like fire. The waters calmed, the glow softened, and the dawn brightened. Together they faced the horizon. Two lives forever joined, one of flesh, one of light, both tied to a promise made in the dark. He had thought she only wanted to swim, but she had carried a burden, a truth, and a plan far greater than he imagined. And in the end, through pain, sacrifice, and love, they had both found something new, a dawn neither could face alone.